Today, we're going back 10 years or so to the jig that first got my brain working on some of those custom heads that we've done recently. We're going to tie the bearded banana. Stay tuned. So, good morning. What we have in the vise today is the jig that I was asked to come up with, kind of design, and we're going back easily 10 years to when I first started doing two-tone heads. It was purely for custom orders. This was first made for a charter captain on Oneida Lake. The head style was a little bit different, but I liked it so much. I also did it on flat heads as well as the walleye style jig, the Barumba that we tie. And I will put it in the vise here. Let's just switch over. And it was a very simple jig. It was the basic yellow. It was the epoxy paint yellow. And then I would, before adding the eyes, I would just do a nice brown back and let some of that color extend down the sides of the jig. But for the most part, it was just a very simple two-tone jig head. Now, the basic design of this jig is very simple. It's nothing special. It's just a two-color jig. It's just a regular bucktail. It does have what we called a beard. It's just a third wing that doesn't extend the same length as the basic color. And as we'll discuss as I'm tying it, I'm going to use bucktail for this, but there's other materials. We could use yarn, dubbing. There's a lot of different colors you can add use just to add a slight bit of color in and around the collar itself. So let's get things situated, and we will put in the vise. What we're tying here, these are leftover heads that I found recently going through some of my inventory. And with the 3 jigs that I have recently done, and if we go back, and I might add some links down below, but you know, videos that I've done in the last 3 months or so, you can go back and look at some of those airbrushed heads, the walleye head, the American shad, and the chartreuse with the orange nose. If those jigs, you know, keep me busy enough as we go into next spring and sales are doing fantastic, I'll add maybe a few more color combinations of the custom airbrushed heads. I don't think I would do this jig particularly. I don't know. It's the person I tied it for, they swear by the color combination. They love it. I'm not sure if this is something I want to do or if I will try to improve on the color combination on the head itself. Maybe using a pearl yellow as opposed to just the flat banana yellow. And I think that's where it kind of got its name, just because it looked like a banana peel that was starting to go bad. So let's tie this thing. So for this, we're using our size A rod wrapping thread, which I do not know what is messed up with this bobbin. So let's just get rid of that. So we lock on our thread as normal. This is round nylon, unwaxed, size A rod wrapping thread. This is actually Pac Bay, which is a brand I really, really like. Now that you can't get good rod. When I do have a large inventory of good rod that I still use regularly, but Pac Bay is a great alternative. Only problem is, as you can see here, this is a brand new spool. If I let it go, it will slowly drop into my bin here. I am able to just place it on my table, and there still is enough tension on this bobbin to keep it from unraveling. I like it fairly snug, but I use my fingers as a brake as we're tying anyways. So to start with, what I have is we're going to use a natural brown. This is actually from a light gray tail. You can use the brown from a white tail, but this tail, as an example, you can see is fairly light. What I'm looking for is a darker natural color. This one's a little bit better, from a natural undyed tail, just a white tail with the brown that goes up the back. But I've been using this light gray dyed tail, and the brown that's a nice dark brown. So too many tools. Alright, so we begin by taking a pinch of our natural brown. Again, removing those broken hairs and the fuzz and all those small fibers from the butt end. And then I switch my grip, and then I stack by hand. Don't want this to look like it went through a hair stacker, but I would like it to be slightly more uniform than if I just snipped it off the tail. And then I can measure it against the shaft of the hook, and what I'm looking for is the tail will extend past the bend of the hook, the length of the body past the bend of the hook, which on this vise conveniently is at the end of the silver part of the jaws. Keep this pinch tight throughout the entire process. That was 5 wraps towards the bend of the hook, 2 wraps to lock it in place, and I'll remove my hand just so you can see the V shape. That's what we're going for. And then I can give it a twist to put it on the side of the jig that will be the top when we fish it. Our next color is just a plain dyed yellow. You can add a stinger hook to this. You can add tinsel and flash. Like I said, originally I tied this for a charter captain that would use this. He always liked stinger hooks and the silver flashaboo. And I would put the silver flashaboo right up the center after the brown and before the yellow. Couple broken tips, so I'm just removing some of those hairs from this pinch. Once I'm happy with that pinch, I can measure. I want want the yellow and the brown to match up. Again, switch your grip and keep this pinch tight through the whole process. And then lock this in place. 5 wraps towards the bend of the hook. There's 3 wraps back towards the head. And again, you can see that V shape, which will keep the hair from pulling out. Before I finish this collar, and like I mentioned, you can use a wool yarn, dubbing, any material that you're happy with, turkey feather even, a dyed turkey, as long as you have something that's red. Calf tail probably would be a smarter choice because you're not using, you know, the longer fibers from your bucktail. But I'm just going to take a sparse pinch, and like usual, we pull those broken hairs and the fuzz from the butt ends, and then I'm going to restack just slightly. This doesn't have to be as stacked as if I was doing a tail, because we're going to measure our pinch and it will not extend any farther than the inside bend of your hook. That's the length we want. Switch our grips. Keep this pinch nice and tight. Lock it in. 3 wraps towards the bend of the hook, and then you can, with touching wraps, walk your thread back up to the head. Though I have some gaps in here, we're gonna finish that. But what I'm looking at this stage, just to be careful, I want these wraps that come to the end to line up. Occasionally, if I'm going quick and not paying attention, your first wrap will go on, and then the second wrap will be slightly forward so you can see the first wrap. You want those to match up. You know, nice pretty collar, that's what we always try to obtain. So now with touching wraps, I can walk the thread back 2/3 of the way, kind of fill in any of those gaps that you see, walk it back up to the head of the jig. I can walk it back 1/4 of the way and then back to the head of the jig. This does a few things, and I don't always go into great detail about the how and whys, but of course I always mention what we're tying is we're trying to make a nice pretty collar. We're trying to make a cone shape that complements the shape of the jig head as it goes into the body of the jig itself. The other thing that we're doing is, as we go back partially and then walk it back to the head, go back half that distance and back to the head, is what we're doing is we're crisscrossing those threads, so we're locking the thread in place. That's what we do every single time. The same with when we'll finish the collar with our loop of thread, and we whip finish. We whip finish in a way that the threads walk towards the bend of the hook and then back, so they crisscross, and our technique is always locking the thread in place with each step. So even though we use head cement, that's why I don't feel the need necessarily to glue a jig together. So at this step, that's a nice pretty collar. I take a size A thread of an opposite color, make a loop and put it underneath my last wrap. There's 5 wraps towards the bend of the hook, and then I can walk the thread back up to the head like we've just said, locking that thread on, so when I take my tag end, place it through the loop and pull it through the collar, that's locked in place. Now I could fish with this jig as is, and that hair would not pull out. It's a good quality jig. Let's turn this off so we can see the jig. In head cement, you know, these are primarily, we're fishing walleye and pike. So the head cement, from my experience, from my perspective, is to protect the collar from those teeth. So when they clamp down and slide back and get hooked, those teeth aren't cutting the threads on your collar and ruining your jig. You know, but I could catch walleye and pike all day on this if they didn't have sharp teeth, I guess. So, you know, we're not looking to glue the jigs together. We're just we're using head cement in this instance specifically to protect the threads from getting nicked from those big toothy fish. So there we go. The lacquer-based head cement is thinned so it saturates those threads. Any of the cement that goes onto the hairs as we coat that collar, capillary action will draw that head cement in and back underneath the collar. There we have it. The jig we called a bearded banana. It has that red throat, which is a nice attractor. You know, another thing that would look nice is using a red tinsel, but tied in place is the throat to add a little bit of flash right where the gills and the head of the fish would be. So I think that will do it for us today. I hope everybody liked this pattern. And like I said, this custom paint job was something that I did years and years ago, but it was the seed that was planted in the back of my mind that I honestly have been thinking about all these years, the best way to go about it. I'd researched different paint types and how to go about doing those colors, and more often than not I decided against it. You know, can you use a rattle can? Yeah, you can for a few jigs. If I had to do 1,000 of them, is that really the best choice? Probably not. Powder paint, of course, is the way to go, but I'm getting a little bit older and I have enough epoxy paint to last me a lifetime. To be honest, probably to last any of my children, if they keep tying jigs, it will last their lifetime. So if I was starting fresh as a new tyer, of course, powder paint is the way to go. But for my situation, no. So thinking about how to do this better, how to provide some of those custom painted heads. Over the past few years, there has been recent improvements in paint, which allows me to use a polymer acrylic, which provides the durability that I'm looking for. And also, I can paint jigs quickly, you know, because a lot of my views on jig tying come from the perspective of trying to do this as a production tyer. So yes, there's better ways to paint, there's better ways to tie, there's fancier ways to tie, but a lot of the things that I do day to day are particularly for production tying and retail sales. So there's a balance there. Can I tie fancy stuff? Can I paint fancy stuff? Of course I can. And maybe that's where some of the criticism comes for the type of jig that I tie. I'm also becoming a dinosaur, so it's hard to find these old-timey jigs, right? So I hope everybody enjoyed what we did here today. Any questions or comments, put those down below. As always, like and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Feel free to share any of these videos. Of course, it helps with getting the information out there and the subscriber count. So I think that will do it for us today. As always, guys, keep tying and tight lines.